Section 2.3 is where we will find and write standard form and slope-intercept form. Standard form is where you will write it in this form. Ax plus by equals c. So the a, b, and c are numbers. So for example, 3x plus 2y equals 6 is in standard form. The x and the y are together on the left side. The constant with no variable is on the right. Two things: you cannot have any fractions when you are writing these. You also cannot have that leading coefficient be negative. Okay, so we have to check for those two things once we get started here. So on this first example, we first have to rearrange the example so that it is in the correct form. So I would want to minus my 2/5 x to the other side so that the x and the y are together over here. Okay, so once I've minused it over, I would have negative 2/5 x plus y equals 14. I can't have any fractions, so to get rid of the fractions, you'll always multiply by the denominator unless it is different numbers for there. So then you would have to multiply by the least common multiple. So what I mean by that is if you had 4 and 8, the least common multiple between those two numbers would be 8 that you would want to multiply. If you had 3 and 5, the least common multiple of those two numbers would be 15. So finding a number that both of them would be able to go into, in other words. So in this case, we have to multiply by 5 all the way through to every single term, okay? And then also, I'm going to multiply by a negative 1 because this first term was negative. That's the leading coefficient that I was referring to. So I'm going to do those two steps at the same time. So when I do negative 5 times negative 2/5, I get positive 2. Negative 5 times positive y equals negative 5y. And then negative 5 times 14 equals negative 70. So now you have transitioned it into standard form. Pause the video and try the got it question. So in the check question, you should have minused your 2/3 over. So then you would have this form, so negative 2/3 x plus y equals a half. Here's an example where you need the least common multiple of 3 and 2. So a number that both of those would go into would be 6, so I would want to multiply by 6. You also have a negative out in front here, so you would need to times by a negative 1. So I'm doing them at the same time. So after timesing by negative 6, I would have positive 4x, negative 6y, and then negative 12. And then next example, we're going to write in slope-intercept form. So remember, slope-intercept form is where you're solving for y every time, okay? This number in front of your x would be your slope. This number behind here by itself would be your y-intercept. So for example, this is in slope-intercept form. Your slope would be 1/2. Your y-intercept would be negative 1. So when it's asking you to write it in slope-intercept form, we're going to rearrange it and solve it for y. So I would minus my 12x first. I cannot combine these two, so I would rewrite it. Negative 4y equals, and I like to put this term first, so negative 12x, positive 24. Now I need to divide everything by negative 4. So I would get positive y, since those 4's cancel, positive 3x, and then a negative 6. Your slope is this number in front of the x, so it would be 3. Your y-intercept will be the number that does not have a variable on it, so it would be negative 6. Pause the video and try the check question. So in the check question, you should be, there's a couple different ways you could start it, but I minus the 3y over so that the x and the y were together. And then I came back and I minus the 6x. So then I had negative 3y equal to negative 6 minus 18. Then I divided everybody by negative 3. So y equals 2x plus 6. So my slope is 2, and my y-intercept would be 6. So there are some word problems where it's just kind of practicing the same thing. So here they're giving you an equation. a huge equation, that can be used to estimate shoe sales in Europe from 2010 to 2015. And X is the number of years after 2010, Y is the revenue in millions of dollars. So part A, write the equation in slope-intercept form. So it's really just practicing the same thing. So I minused my 3246, I minused that guy over first. And then I came back and I divided by -2, and this was my equation. So based off my equation, your y-intercept is always your starting amount. So my y-intercept in this case, sorry, I'm in the wrong spot. My y-intercept down here, in this case, is always my starting amount. So that's where I was at the beginning. So year 0, before they started calculating, this is where I was starting at. And then this is your slope. Remember, slope is always a rate of change. So I am changing each year. That's my rate each year. I'm changing each year by that 1623. Pause the video and try the next question. So again, you're supposed to write it into slope-intercept form. So you would want to add over your 10.5x and divide everything by 3. So this would be my equation. Then it wants you to interpret what's going on in this situation. So your starting amount that you have is $52. So I started in 2015 with the ticket price at $52. This is my rate of change. So each year, my price of my ticket is increasing by $3.50. Okay, so then part 2 of this lesson is we will talk about point slope form. Point slope form will look like this. You will put in your slope in this M spot, and then your point will be written as this. So this will be my X coordinate, this will be my Y coordinate. So I only place numbers in those 3 spots. So let's take a look to see what that looks like. So here we have us writing an equation where you are given a point and you have a slope. So here's my point slope form. I would put my slope in for 11. I would put my x in for the x sub 1. And I would put my y in for the y sub 1. The only simplifying you have to do is when you have these double negatives right here, you need to change those to plus positives. Pause the video and try the next question. So in the next question, you should have come up with this equation. Y minus 6 equals 7 in parentheses x plus 2. So only simplifying is when you had the minus and the -2. Last part is still putting it in point slope form, but what if they give you 2 points to start with? So now we would have to find our slope. So remember your slope formula is this guy here. So here's x1, y1. Here's x2, y2. And then I'm going to plug them in to find my slope. So y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. And then I simplify my fraction. So my slope number would be 2. Since there are 2 points, you can pick either point to write your equation. So I could do my slope in this spot, but swap out with whatever point that I want to. Pause the video and try the last question. So in the last question, you should have found your slope to give you -4. You have 2 options that you could have written, either using 414 or you could have used -238. All right, so this lesson is where you are writing equation using all 3 forms.